Wake up, Irene.
Oh, really? Thought I'd show off my farmer's tan today.
You have a farmer's tan?
Yeah, yeah. It's nice and tan down here. It sort of fades in here, depending on the length of the sleeve. You know.
Hey friends, you're watching BrainStormAcres. I'm Henry.
And I'm Irene.
It's been a heck of a week. It's been over 100 degrees for the past 5 or 6 days. It's 106 today. We live in what's called the Intermountain West. So we have this unfortunate or fortunate, depending on how you view, confluence of mountain ranges, mountain ridges, and weather patterns from the west coast, from the northwest, and from Canada, and coming up in the Gulf.
Right, and the worst, because I was talking to my daughter yesterday about, she said she was going to check the path of where Hurricane Beryl, which is no longer a hurricane obviously, but it's still making a mess, is going after it gets done with Texas. And I said, yeah, she said, so a friend asked me if it was going to affect us, and I said, no, it wouldn't have, that one wouldn't particularly affect us. The ones we have to watch for, and I have tried to explain this to people in Arizona a bunch of times, they need to learn their geography.
Well, as a general rule, that's good for everybody.
Yeah.
If you don't know your geography, you're at a serious disadvantage.
Yeah, I mean, Baja, California is not as far away as you would think it is. And Baja, Mexico. I mean, it goes Mexico into California over there. If a hurricane of decent size hits Baja, it sometimes is going sort of northeast. Well, northeast takes you straight into the bottom of Arizona. And it depends on exactly the trajectory of how much we catch. But it can make a heck of a mess. So some of our worst storms here ever have been out of Baja. And then in the wintertime, the worst storms usually come out of the northeast, which is the total opposite of our normal weather pattern. You get a reverse circulation. And that's when you're getting stuff that's kind of coming down out of the upper mountains and even as far away as the Rockies, where you're getting something that's sliding down the reverse way that it normally would.
Now, we watch a number of different weather channels. Channels on YouTube and weather.com.
Yep.
We follow the National Weather Service. We look for satellite imagery. We follow the storms as they start off the coast of Africa and come across, because that's where stuff starts. And you can pretty much predict within a week or so of when something might hit us.
Right.
You know, it's funny because sometimes we get surprised. That's one of the joys of the Intermountain West. But you get far enough down in southern Arizona and it's different. You know, we hear all the time that people are surprised. Oh, the monsoons have hit. That's a big surprise.
And I'm like, okay, there's a season for the monsoons, the same way as they have hurricane seasons.
And tornado seasons.
And tornado seasons. Although that has switched a lot up in the last couple of years because of the climatic changes. But there's actually a season, I think it starts June 15th or something.
Yeah, the calendar time date is actually June 15th.
Right.
It goes until, I think, September-ish.
Yeah. About September 15th.
The real story is that the monsoons are described by certain atmospheric conditions happening. They generally happen around the 15th of June, but they can happen later.
Well, and that's kind of like the warning period. That's kind of like, okay, it's June 15th, heads up.
Be ready for heavy rain.
Be ready for heavy rain. Or no rain at all. I mean, probably the worst year here was 6 or 8 years ago when it didn't come until the end of July. Oh my gosh, the poor wild animals were going crazy trying to get to anything that had water. The jackrabbits would stand on their hind legs and strip the bark and the leaves off of trees. I mean, it was just devastating. And you felt so sorry for them, but you can't afford to put water out for them. I mean, you know.
You know, you can get an unusual weather event anywhere you live, whether you live in the west coast of the U.S., the east coast of the U.S.
Or anywhere in between.
In South Africa. South Africa was having really cold temperatures for this time of year for them.
Yeah.
Every place in the world has an opportunity for unusual weather patterns. But as a general rule, you can reasonably predict the general pattern that's going to happen. And if you live in a place for a while, you'll get to learn them if you pay attention.
Right, and that's the biggest thing I see, is that most people are simply not paying attention. Now, The sensible people that I know out here, and I quote sensible because not everybody out here is even sort of sensible, who generally the people who've lived here for a long time, because the people who are not sensible generally don't last all long. They understand this sort of stuff. And when people are like, was it last year or the year before that the people in Westwood got stuck up there?
Last year.
Yeah. Okay. Now we did have a decent snowstorm, and it was worse northeast of us, which is where Westwood is. But basically the problem was they had all moved out there in the last couple of years, and the last couple of years have had mild winters.
And the same goes for the people that we follow down in southern Arizona.
90% of the people have not lived there for more than 5 years.
Yeah, so they came in during a period of
Quiescence.
benign weather.
Yes.
It wasn't trying to kill you.
Yeah, right.
Now, some other friends who built in a place where we observed that you need to build your place up because you live in a flood zone.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the thing is here. I studied geology in college. And when I look at a site, I can tell you if it's in a flood zone. And I feel like I got some of that as a kid because my dad was an architect, and he would sometimes note the drainage problems in an area and the fact that they would need to put in some sort of a sump area to collect water or do something or move it, you know, so that sort of thing. So maybe it was just a combination of 9,000 experiences of life plus college. But one of the places that we looked at when we were looking at houses out here, you had to drive up a wash to get it.
It was very clearly a wash, and the real estate agent said, "Oh, this road is no problem. You can just go on."
And I'm like,
"This
isn't a road. This is a wash." And that means that in order to repair that road would have been literally an Army Corps of Engineers project. And you're going across all kinds of, I mean, it was not even a great house once we got there. But it would have bugged me to death because I would have had to repair it was brand new, but they had done a really crappy job of trimming it out. And all the trim, probably because they put up wet trim, all the trim had shrunk. So there was like 1/4-inch gaps everywhere. And I would have spent a fortune in trim to finish that up. But just the fact of driving up a wash. Oh, and you could see about 4 different houses, like within spitting distance of the house. So I'm like, I'm going to drive up a wash, risk life and limb to get here, to have neighbors this close? Oh,
I don't think so. You can tell we're of the same mind. But look, there's a couple of things that we want to leave you with as we close this out. Number one, weather happens everywhere. Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, it's reasonably predictable within some amount of time. You know that if you live near the Great Lakes, there's certain kinds of weather that's going to happen. You know that you're going to have some kinds of
lake effect
rain.
Snow.
You're going to have lake effect snow in the wintertime. Mm-hmm. You're going to have ice. You're going to have heavy wind. If you live on the East Coast, if you have a certain kind of winter storm coming up the coast, you know it's likely that you're going to get dumped on with snow, or you're going to get dumped on with rain. You know, we have an interesting situation here because we live in the Intermountain West. That means sometimes we do get surprised. We've been surprised by hail. It was unforecast in July.
Mm-hmm. But we now know that that's a normal part of the summer. And
it happens.
If you are really determined to have a large garden outside in the summer, the only way to do it effectively is to have covers so that it won't beat the stuffings out of your plants. Otherwise, you might look at your tomatoes and they might be okay. I mean, the plants might be a little shredded, but the tomatoes themselves they'll be okay. They're not. They're bruised, and they will actually rot before they will ripen a lot of times, or they'll have so many squishy spots on them that you have to throw them away.
So look around when you start thinking to yourself. If you ever say, "Boy, the monsoons just came," or "Boy, that was a surprise the monsoons came," or "It was a surprise that it got cold because it's wintertime." Those kinds of things should give you a big clue.
Right.
Take the time to learn your own weather patterns. If you're living in a spot for a while, it really, really pays to understand what's happening with your weather and why.
Right. And
it's not that difficult.
And look at your building codes. We see people all the time who will always build to the minimum standards.
Don't do that.
No. My personal belief, given the amount of funds to do it and the ability and everything else, is always build to 100-year standards.
Or more.
Or more if you can afford it. Because the whole, oh, well, how many places have we seen in the last 5 years that have had 100-year floods 5 years in a row?
Or 500-year floods.
Yeah. So, you know, there are limitations, obviously, as to what you're capable of dealing with. But don't be shocked if your place is near a river and suddenly your river is in your yard and you have to call for a deep water rescue and all that other stuff. It's part of the deal of living where you live. So if you live someplace that can get cold and can snow, well, you have to be prepared for the fact that you might get 10 times more snow than you've ever seen before in your life. It happens.
Or you might not get any.
Oh, the first year we were in Maine, the kids were ticked off because we came within 1 inch of setting a new low for the amount of snow we got. Now, the next year we made up for it. But that happens. I mean, one year you'll have some ridiculously small quantity of snow, which can be problematic. It doesn't insulate the ground as much. You can have bulbs and stuff like that killed by the cold because there's nothing insulating them. And the next year you're going, I have no place to stick the snow. Where do I put it?
And we had that happen. Well, look, taking the weather into account isn't that difficult.
No.
There are plenty of resources to check out. The problem we have is there's not a lot of radar coverage in our area. There's not many weather forecasters who are really competent who cover the Intermountain West. And for your weather, it's not what's happening 50 or 100 miles from you.
It's what's happening where you are.
It's right where you are, and 100 miles, 200 miles, 500 miles, 1,000 miles from where you are. All those things will impact.
Right. I found that there's one weather group in Arizona, it's Channel 12, that we can tune. I have it as an app on my phone, and it gives me weather alerts. And they are specifically forecasting just for Arizona. Yeah, their forecasts are mostly geared towards the Phoenix metro and the Tucson area because that's the large population. But they do give northern Arizona forecasts too. And their stuff has been pretty spot on.
Good, yeah.
Pretty spot on. So figure out who in your area really has a clue, you know.
But watch other people too, especially for what's developing outside of your area.
Yeah, because historically, when we first we would watch the Weather Channel or something, and they were like, and I'm like, there's a big storm off of California. Most of the storms go west to east, but they're ignoring it like it doesn't exist, like there's a wall between us and it. And I knew there wasn't, and we got slammed. But we were ready because I was watching.
Yeah, so pay attention. It's not that hard.
You can't change what's going to happen, but you can at least be semi-ready. You can have your milk and your eggs and your butter and stuff like that in the fridge, and if you need extra generator fuel or any of those other things, you can make sure you don't have a doctor appointment during that. I mean, I've canceled appointments before.
Yeah,
because there was no way.
I've canceled a number.
Yeah. Well, if I-40 is closed, we can't get there.
Yeah. So, well, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so that you get notifications when we publish something new, because we're always doing something.
Yeah, and we're going to be very busy for the next 9 million years.
Well, at least through the 1st of September.
Yeah, we have a lot going on. So,
hey, keep brainstorming.
We do.
My head hurts
still. Bye.
Bye.